Welcome, episode 2 of the DIVEBOMB IndyCar Podcast with myself, Dan, as usual. Joined by Archie and Ellie this week. Welcome back, you two.
Thank you.
Indy GP this weekend. So obviously IndyCar was on the road course ahead of the Indy 500 in 2 weeks' time. Obviously the greatest spectacle in racing that's been in the news recently. We might touch on that later. But another Indy GP, another absolutely cracking race won by Alex Palou ahead of Pato O'Ward and Alexander Rossi with his first podium for Aaron McLaren. Interesting race, but who impressed us this weekend?
I think first we have to mention Alex Palou. He led most of the race in the end, and ultimately won by about a 15-second margin, which is quite impressive because you don't often get such runaway wins in IndyCar. Yet Palou seems to be making somewhat of a habit of it. I mean, he did it at the end of last season at Laguna, and he's shown consistency to start this season. Leads the championship now, and I mean the strategy from the 10 team was good, but Palou executed it and more. Really, it was a fantastic drive.
Yeah, absolutely perfect from Palou today, and as you said, he won by 30 seconds of Laguna Seca last year. Not quite as impressive today, but still another real runaway performance from Palou, and great start to the year for him. And obviously, with that result, he takes the lead of the standings. And again, he's absolutely faultless. When on Palou's day, he is the perfect driver, and he's proving why he should be considered one of the best, and why he is an IndyCar champion yet again.
I feel like Rossi did that really well because it's his first podium, isn't it? So I feel like it's good for him to get that and get that confidence as well.
Absolutely. We saw Rossi had a bit of a shaky start to the season, to be honest. He was slightly more off the pace than I thought he would be, but he's gone decently at Indy. Obviously, he won there last year. It was a bit dodgy, and there's no denying that. But yet again, another strong performance with Rossi on the road course, picking up his first McLaren podium. And it's still quite a quiet day for Rossi, all things considered, but he got the job done, and good day for him and McLaren in general, actually.
Yeah, it was an excellent day for McLaren. All 3 cars came home in the top 5 in the end. O'Ward with another second place. He fought his way sort of into contention after I think it was the second round of stops. But it's his second place of the season, which is, that's excellent consistency, and that is the sort of thing that in IndyCar will win you championships eventually.
Grosjean and O'Ward are the only 2 drivers to actually finish second this season, which kind of sums up both their luck this year. O'Ward definitely should have won at St. Petersburg, and had Grosjean not crashed out of Texas, that could have been very different as well. Obviously today, Palou was the runaway performer, and he was the right winner today. There was no chance O'Ward was going to get him. But I still think it's a very encouraging result for McLaren and O'Ward. It's a track they've never tended to be amazing at. O'Ward individually, he's never been that strong around the road course, and he's kind of putting in that consistency, which has always lacked him. I think what put Palou and him apart was Palou had that consistency, and I think start to the year shown O'Ward does have that in his locker as well.
I mean, back on McLaren again, Rosenqvist said he didn't have sort of the best of days, yet he still came home 5th. So that shows what a strong day they had. No,
I think Rosenqvist as well is actually having a really good start to the year. And obviously his job this year is to convince McLaren to run 4 cars instead of just the 3, because Palou is going to be taking his seat next year, and he needs to prove to McLaren that he should be in that team. And I think he's doing a really, really sterling effort this year, and I really hope he does stay.
Yeah, I agree. I think he's proven to start the season. He's been quite reliable, and that's the sort of thing that should earn him a contract.
Yeah, absolutely. That team is really on the up, and I think this year they've been really strong at every round. There's not a single round they looked to be really weak at all. Maybe Long Beach, but every other round they've been right at the front. One team who we've also seen that from the season is Andretti, but today they weren't on the pace today. None of their 4 drivers actually looked particularly strong out in Indy.
I mean, only Kirkwood got into the fast 12 in qualifying. I think that kind of showed where their pace was over the weekend. Grosjean was absolutely incandescent with rage after after not making it to the Fast 12, he was not happy.
I saw that bit on the thing as well. I was like slightly watching it and that's like paying attention, and I look back and I just see him with his arms up, like shouting.
Yeah, it was a bit of a bizarre outburst, to be honest. But yeah, not a strong weekend for Andretti. Herta looked a bit more on it, which is encouraging news for him. We obviously touched on him last week. It was a bit more encouraging for Herta. He's kind of running in the top 5 for periods of time. But the first weekend this year, they've looked off the pace, and which is really odd because this was the one track last year that they were really, really good at. Obviously, winning both May and August with Herta and Rossi, and funnily enough, this year is literally the opposite. It's the one track they can't get right.
I think the race didn't pan out in the best way for them either. Grosjean had to come in for a wing change, as far as I remember, so that dropped him towards the back at the start. He recovered to about 11th, which is a good effort. Kirkwood, he also had an incident which maybe we should discuss actually with Will Power, where it appeared Power kind of pushed him onto the grass, and then Kirkwood sent Power into a spin, and then it was Kirkwood that got penalised for it, sent to the back of the pack, which it seemed kind of harsh because he was on the grass, and it's hard to tell whether he could have rejoined in any other way, or whether he was actually fully in control of his car. But yeah, it wasn't a good day for Andretti.
Yeah, second actually really bizarre penalty I think we've had this year. The first one was obviously Rossi and Kirkwood at Texas, where I think Rossi was penalised for Kirkwood cutting across him in the pits. So it's just been the second really odd steward decision this year, where they've seemed to penalise the guy who seemed completely innocent. So it's an interesting one.
I had to rewatch that multiple times, and I was just going back and just carrying on watching it, because I was like, if I was in that position as well, you have a split second to make a decision, and when you're on the grass, it's harder to tell how you're going to rejoin, and it's unpredictable. So I don't know. I feel like maybe he shouldn't have been penalised for that.
Well, Power was frustrated with his spotter because apparently he didn't tell him Kirkwood was there. So I don't know. I thought it was harsh, maybe a racing incident, but
Power placed more blame on himself than Kirkwood. So I think that tells you everything you need to know. Will Power doesn't tend to be a person who's particularly calm and in moments of despair, but even he was one to admit that was his fault. So yeah, another really odd one from the IndyCar stewards out there.
What was the penalty for it as well? Sorry, I was trying to find this out and I couldn't see it.
The penalty for Kirkwood, he was sent to the back of the field, I think.
Ridiculous.
Or had to go behind. Or maybe he had to go behind Power, who was at the back of the field because of the spin.
All right.
Bizarre. But yeah, bad day for Andretti, but a team who had a really good weekend, Rahal, Letterman, and Lanigan.
I mean, yeah, we spoke about them. I believe we touched on them in the last episode slightly about sort of, how poorly they had started the season, and it had been really quite dreadful. I know, obviously it's an oval, but Texas was an absolutely wretched weekend for them. But yeah, even through practice, I think Lundgaard and Harvey were 2nd and 5th respectively. I think in both practice sessions maybe, and Rahal was kind of up there as well. They all qualified inside the top 8. Harvey and Lundgaard made it into the Fast 6. I think it was Harvey's first Fast 6 for about 2 years.
21, yes, it's 21.
And then Lundgaard, for the first time, started on the pole, which was, it was impressive. I think he maybe started 3rd twice before, but that was a great effort from him, and it was sort of indicative of the strides forward they made, or at least the track suiting them a lot more.
Yeah, it's actually tended to be decent on road courses this year, because Lundgaard did very well in Alabama, it's got to be said, but all 3 cars were on the pace today. Even Harvey, who, as we know, has had a really, really tough last 2 seasons for the team, but all 3 of them look really, really on the pace. Obviously, Lundgaard finished P4 in the end, probably slightly unfortunate not to be on the podium, but his pole was very, very impressive. And Rahal was spun at the start, didn't he? Or had an issue at the start?
Yeah, he got a puncture at the start, so it was kind of a recovery drive for him. I think he ended up 10th. He did a pretty good job. He was, saving fuel. I think he had.
He was placed on an odd strategy, wasn't he?
Yeah, I think he used 15 seconds of his push to pass or something because he was in such a sort of fuel saving mode. But to come home 10th, that was impressive. And I think it was just unfortunate for Harvey because he looked like it was going to be a real confidence booster of a weekend. And he seemed to just spin without any contact from anyone. And he didn't recover. He ended up finishing 20th, which was kind of, it's not much to show for a weekend that did look like it was going to be a stride forward. And hopefully can take confidence for the pace he showed sort of prior to race day.
Yeah, disappointing for Harvey, but I think he'll still take a lot from this weekend. He's got it in him, and I think that's something definitely to take away from it, because I feel that's the first time at his Rahal career we've seen him anywhere near that sort of level, and I hope he takes it as a confidence boost, because it's hard to see any driver go. I'm disappointed to see Jack Harvey go at the end of the season, but even though on paper the result isn't great, I think there's a lot to take from this weekend for Harvey.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's some other interesting points to pick up on, maybe for some weaker teams, the Indy GP. I think Penske's one to talk about. And
yeah, that was my next point as well.
It was kind of proof that in IndyCar, because it is so competitive, like being slightly out of the window or sort of making a slight mistake somewhere can really punish you. And that was the case. I think Power was the only driver to make it into the Fast 12.
He got 12th as well, didn't he? So
and that was 12th. Yeah, he struggled to make any inroads towards the Fast 6. Newgarden went out in Q1. I think he did get caught up in
Peterson.
I think Peterson spun, but again, I don't know if Newgarden was really going to make it. McLaughlin was admittedly in a tough group, but again, he kind of fell foul to the fact that Ganassi, who, other than Pelot, we haven't actually mentioned, who were fairly strong. McLaren and Rahal being sort of the stronger teams, and from there it was kind of a sort of recovery job for the weekend. Newgarden did a great job in the race. I think he ended up 7th after starting 13th. Power, I think he maybe got up to 12th, I think it was, after the incident that we've spoken about. McLaughlin, he also had to have his front wing replaced after some sort of early contact. He was running 11th again. He was going to pick up some good points, but he ran out of fuel on the last lap.
Did he?
So he ended 16th.
It's not a great weekend for Penske, especially at a track we know Will Power has been superb at over the years, and for him to qualify 12th and have a fairly anonymous race apart from that spin is a bit disappointing for Penske. And we touched on this last week, but the start of the season hasn't been amazing. Yes, they have won the 2 races, but it only feels like on weekend only one of the drivers is on the pace, if any at all. So it's been a really odd start for them. And Indy's one they've never gone. Indianapolis 500 they've never tended to go too well at either. So
I think more sort of generically speaking about the race, I mean, maybe some people haven't regarded it as having been the most competitive, entertaining of races, but it's still so competitive throughout the field. Obviously, barring Pelot sort of running away at the end, but even then, it says a lot about IndyCar and the racing product that you can have a race where, someone's leading and winning by 15 seconds, yet you're still fairly engaged in the race. There's always something going on sort of through the pack. And I think looking from race to race, it's so unpredictable. Like there's so many swings. You look how the RLL team can go from being so poor to being so good. Like that just shows like the fine margins and just how competitive it is as a series.
I mean, we got 5 winners in 5 races so far, and unbelievably, neither Pato O'Ward or Roman Grosjean one of those 5, believe it or not. And you still look at other names like Scott Dixon or Will Power who haven't won races this year. And yeah, it's just a testament to how competitive IndyCar is that neither O'Ward and Grosjean have won this year. And obviously, Indy's always a bit unpredictable. So could easily make it 6 out of 6. So yeah, just testament to how competitive it is. I think it was 7 from 7 and 21, I believe it was. So hopefully they could beat that streak. That would be quite something.
Yeah, I think I noted that of the top 6 finishers at the Indy GP, none of them had won a race sort of prior earlier this season, which again, it's impressive.
Yeah, absolutely. Good testament to IndyCar. And yet again, even as you said in the race, probably was the weakest this year, still really captivating. And I think it's the reason why IndyCar is becoming a lot more noticed by fans worldwide. I think it's time for the first edition of Canapino Watch, where our fan favourite Augustine Canapino gets a special mention for his performance in the race. Finished 21st, on paper not bad. Oh well, it's not great, but he performed well. He performed decently to Canapino. He was on the pace of Iolot, who had a bit of an anonymous weekend. A solid effort from our man Canapino.
I mean, yeah, and I think before we recorded, you mentioned this, Dan, that actually it's not a bad thing that maybe we sometimes don't see him in races, because it means he's, not doing anything like preposterously bad. And the fact, I think he was running inside the top 15 at one point, even ahead of Iolot. So to be so competitive with a guy who's got, a lot more single-seater experience is impressive.
Yeah, absolutely. And you compare him to Rob, who's got 4 retirements from 5 races, and Benjamin Pedersen has just been absolutely anonymous. I thought Canapino would probably be the worst rookie this year, but he's kept it quiet, he's kept it clean, and not only has he kept it clean, the pace isn't obviously incredible, but for a rookie who's got no single seater experience, he's doing a sterling effort, and he's ahead of names like Castroneves, Pagenaud, Daly in the championship. So absolutely respect to Canapino again. Kept his nose clean, beat Castroneves, he beat Ferrucci, and he beat Pedersen at the GP. And as we said, he wasn't too far off Iolot today pace wise. So another encouraging weekend for Canapino, and lot to take from it, I think.
Yeah, talking to the rookies, there was a little bit of teammate drama involving Rob, who he was battling with Grosjean. I think they were both going in a bit hot. Grosjean went deep. I think he might have ended up slightly on the grass. And then it did initially look like Malukas had sort of closed the door on his teammate, but actually it did transpire that Rob was coming in a bit too hot. And Inhand ended up taking himself out, and he took Malukas out. I think Malukas kind of, he didn't want to make it into a drama. He knows his teammate's a rookie. He was a rookie last year. So, he knows these sort of mistakes can happen. But yeah, a little bit of inter-team stuff going on at Dale Coyne.
It was just a lot of like McLaren fighting. Well, not fighting, but like McLaren alongside McLaren that I saw a lot.
Yeah, obviously we touched on McLaren earlier, but all 3 were actually pretty on the pace compared to each other. It wasn't O'Ward an extra 5 or 6 positions ahead like it has been previously this year. So again, encouraging for Rossi and Rosenqvist for sure. And if we look ahead to the 500, both of them have previously gone strong there as well. So good to see Aaron McLaren fighting at the front. As we said, they've kind of been strong at every race this year. So definitely encouraging for them.
The concept of, I think, momentum going into the 500 is an interesting one, because obviously nothing translates going from the road course to the oval. But I think having such a good result for a team that are typically quite strong at the 500, that sort of momentum could be a big positive for them heading into the 500, especially for Rossi, who, he does seem like he is, getting up to grips with it now and sort of in the nick of time. And the amount of practice that they have ahead of the 500 should only enhance that sort of gelling of the new third car.
Yeah, McLaren have tended to go really strongly at the 500 in the last 2 or 3 years. So definitely encouraging, especially for a team that looks so strong on ovals. All 4 of their drivers are amongst the best in the field at ovals, and momentum is really important. You look back to 2019, where Simon Pagenaud won the road course and then proceeded to win qualifying and win the race in quite dramatic fashion. So I think momentum definitely is an underrated factor. Yes, the Indy road course is a completely different track to the oval, but it's kind of that confidence boost and that momentum which you could definitely take along with you. So that's the road course done. So obviously a lot to discuss from that. Championship standing wise, we'll quickly run over. Palou obviously took the lead through his victory. He's 6 points ahead of O'Ward, who's further 13 ahead of Ericsson, who we haven't actually touched on yet. Another very Marcus Ericsson day, didn't really seem to be anywhere. Then there's a bit of a gap to Grosjean, McLaughlin, Newgarden, Dixon, and Power, who are all in a clump together before we're looking at Lundgaard, Kirkwood, Rossi, and Herta, who again similarly clumped on points. So slight change in the standings. But we are starting to get to that stage in the season now, where the early season good results are neutralising themselves out. Who are our early championship contenders, do we reckon?
I think obviously Pallou's started the season strongly. I think you have to look at the top two really, Palou and O'Ward, and then possibly Ericsson as well, just for the consistency that they've delivered. That maybe some of those that are in the clump slightly further back haven't yet shown. But I think there have been signs from. I mean, Newgarden. It's really hard to tell because he's had so much sort of bad luck with contact or little issues in the car that it's hard to tell where he really is. I think McLaughlin has showed at Barber what he can do, and I think he'll be up there. But again, I think it's going to go down to the wire because five winners in 5 races, and that sort of pattern will probably continue, and there'll be swings and roundabouts throughout the rest of the season.
I was just gonna say, if Award keeps up with the consistency, even if he doesn't like win, as long as he stays like around second, then I feel like he has a good chance of like being in the competition of being winning. So
Yeah, I forgot to mention Grosjean there as well. I think obviously before the Indy GP, I think a lot of people were saying he could be the race winner there, and just because Andretti maybe weren't quite in the window, that never materialised. But I think Grosjean's definitely one to keep an eye on as well.
Yeah, I mean, because it's so competitive, I think the one thing you do have to look out for is literally one race can make all the difference. So I was chatting to someone about this the other week. If you look at the 2022 standings, you can kind of pinpoint a moment for all of the top 7 in the championship where they lost the title. So last year, Newgarden lost it, having that mechanical failure in Iowa. Dixon lost it, having that pit lane speed penalty at the 500. McLaughlin kind of lost it, mainly in that early Indy phase, sort of start of the season. Palou's was kind of that contact of Ericsson at Road America. I think there's another instance with as well as the 500. I should say Ericsson was kind of the Long Beach and Nashville incidents, whilst O'Ward was kind of that really bad run of luck he had between Road America and almost towards the end of the season by Iowa. So it could turn around so quickly. I think that's something to keep note of. But what I definitely will say is I do think I can see both Palou and O'Ward going the distance. I think we'll have a discussion about this a bit later on. But they've been easily both top 3 drivers this season. But you can never count out Newgarden either. He's when he's on it, he is so on it. So I think we'll see probably the same top 3 as we saw in 2021.
I think you've got to keep an eye on Dixon and Power as well, the sort of experienced heads. I think it's this sort of new and improved Power where he's sort of a bit more measured that we saw last year that won the championship, and he's got 1 podium so far this season, but he has kept relatively quiet, but he's kind of still up there. I know 52 points he isn't particularly, like right in touch with the championship lead, but it's, again, it's a race difference more or less, and he's, the difference from putting him straight back in contention. So much can change. There's still a long way to go.
Yeah, I mean, Dixon's one which is really good to highlight actually. Why is it not the Scott Dixon who wins week in week out anymore? He's always sort of consistently between third and 8th sort of every week, and it's that consistency which gets the job done. And because of that, when other drivers have these moments and have these bad races, because he's just so consistent, he automatically gets chucked back into the championship mix. And as we said, literally like 1 win can turn your season around. So absolutely no counting out Scott Dixon, as well as he's being such a legend of the series.
He's another that produced one of those sort of recovery drives that defined the Indy GP. I think he got caught up in. He didn't get any contact or anything, but he was compromised a bit by some of the incidents on what was quite a frenetic first lap and dropped back quite a bit, but he ended up 6th. He sort of quietly made his way back up.
Yeah, another impressive performance. And Dixon's very consistent this season. 3rd, 5th, 6th, and 7th. Obviously finished at the back of Long Beach, but he was running in the top 5 before the incident with O'Ward. Again, Scott Dixon just epitome of consistency, and it's kind of the same for all that Ganassi team, really. The only ones who really do show consistency, both Dixon, Palou, and Ericsson, they just tend to get their results done, which is something a lot of other teams struggle with, particularly Penske. I feel one that struggled with that consistency, and something McLaren are getting better at, but Chip Ganassi seems to be the only team who can master getting a a solid result week in, week out.
I think with Ganassi as well, Marcus Armstrong made the fast 12 again. And
Yep.
while he's not yet on par with his teammates, he's there-ish. You know, he finished 15th, so it's not a bad result. He's still leading the Rookie of the Year standings, despite obviously having missed Texas, and he'll miss the 500 as well. But
yeah,
you never know whether he'll end up doing the 3 remaining oval races, as we mentioned last week.
Yes, good point raised there. You got to give Armstrong time. You look at his countryman Scott McLaughlin. His first season, he had the flashes of brilliance. So he had kind of that Texas podium, and he might have got podium somewhere else. But I might be incorrect in saying that. But in the second season, that's kind of where McLaughlin came flying up the blocks, and I can kind of see the same happening with Armstrong. Just give him a bit of time. It might be at the end of the day, it's a learning season for him, and come next 2-3 seasons, I reckon he'll be at the front of the pack.
Yeah, McLaughlin did get 1 podium his first season. It's probably a good opportunity to plug a piece I've got out on the DIVEBOMB site on McLaughlin, sort of his rise through IndyCar, and how he sort of, even last season, became a championship contender, and in his 3rd full season is firmly a championship contender, which has been an impressive rise. So I've sort of done a long feature piece on his career so far and how he's got here.
Yes, do please check that out. I'll tell you why I'm disappointed that Indy 500 doesn't have double points. It means Canapino's got quite a challenge to lead the Rookie of the Year standings again. So you never know. It's the Indy 500. He could knack a good result. But yeah, I think Armstrong's probably got that safe actually for Indy. And obviously, if he does run Iowa and Gateway, he's in a very good position to take that Rookie of the Year award this season.
McLaughlin might be the only Penske driver to have actually made the Fast 6. I think I heard Will Power say. Don't take my word on that. But I think McLaughlin possibly is the only Penske driver to have made the Fast 6. I don't know if you can remember any other occasions.
I'll have a look now. McLaughlin made the Fast 6 in St. Petersburg, where he proceeded to crash out, if I remember correctly. None of them made it in Long Beach. Alabama, McLaughlin made it again. And then no one's made it in Indy. So yeah, Newgarden not making a Fast 6, that is pretty incredible.
Yeah, it's been just a weird one for Penske. They just, I think they've got to step up to make. There's some sort of, I don't know, if they just seems to be out of the window a bit too often.
Yeah, I mean, it's always, as I said, the consistency has always really lacked Penske. It's just when they do have a good weekend, they're just dominant. Because it's Penske and because it's Newgarden, McLaughlin, and Power, we expect them to become good. But as we keep on touching on, a really, really odd start, and Indy, it's never been good for them, really, especially in the last couple of years. So it's going to be an interesting one for sure.
Yeah, I mean, Newgarden was top of the times in the open test. The one day that they got in the end, obviously, with the second day being wiped out because of weather. But it's really this week where everyone's running, for definite the cars that they'll be running in the 500. And I think it's during these practice sessions that we will find out the true, or at least get a sense of the pecking order.
Absolutely. So let's look forward to the 500 now. We've chatted enough about the road course. Don't need to tell you, biggest event of the year. We'll have a separate preview for that next week after qualifying. But we're going to have a look at qualifying, obviously, taking place this weekend. Obviously, we've got a couple of tests before that. Touched on it last week, but the main talking point again is going to be bumping. So 34 cars, 33 spaces for the race. I know it's tough, but is there anyone we think, who's the person we think will not make the cut?
Yeah, I think I'm probably looking, and I guess it's something that a lot of people are saying, RC Unison in the Able Motorsports entry. It's obviously a later entry, the 34th car, as a lot of people are regarding it, maybe. I think they're the ones that most are saying might get bumped just because of it being a late entry. They didn't do the open test, so they'll come into practice having not had any running. So they are probably my sort of early pick to be bumped.
I'm going to go slightly bolder. I'm going to say Catherine Legg. hasn't raced an IndyCar for 10 years. I'm tempted to say it's been a while. Yeah, it's been a while. I think it's 10 years. And at a Rahal team who've tended to struggle on ovals and kind of being that fourth entry, don't quite have the support. So I'm gonna unfortunately Catherine Legg is gonna be getting bumped. But point about bumping is, although we make predictions for who we think will get bumped, there's always kind of the magical moments. You think back to 2019, where an unsponsored Juncos car of Carl Kaiser, not Fernando Alonso, out the Indy 500. Yes, Alonso's problems are well documented, and if it wasn't for McLaren, he would have easily qualified. But as we said, you can get these magical moments, and you don't ever quite know.
And like we mentioned earlier with Herta in the race last year, you never know what could happen with incidents, and if people have to go to spare cars or sort of qualifying crashes, they could be pretty detrimental with the jeopardy of a bump.
Obviously, is it Saturday the main qualifying's on? This Sunday's bumping? Am I incorrect on that?
I believe that is right.
Yeah, so we have. So if you didn't know, on Saturday we decide positions 13 to 29, and we have the final row qualifying, also known as bumping, where we'll knock one person at the Indy 500, as well as the Fast 12 qualifying, where we'll decide the first 12 positions who gain championship points depending on where they finished. Starting off for 12 for the pole man and 1 for 12th place. Probably hard to predict the pole man. Dixon's been pole sitter the last 2 years, so he would be one. You couldn't quite count out, but I think we'll all agree. Too early to tell. Friday we'll get a better picture, but probably too early to tell. So let you know of the different entries. So obviously Ed Carpenter is back to doing ovals. Sato is in for Armstrong, as is the case with the first 2 rounds. And then we move on to the bonus entries. So we've got RC Enison, as we touched on, for Able Motorsports. We've got Marco Andretti, as he always does, in for the 500. I wonder if he can produce something again. Obviously, he got pole in 2020. Tony Kanaan for his final Indianapolis 500 is for McLaren, as well as Ryan Hunter-Ray, 2014 Indianapolis 500 winner, Stephen Wilson for Dreyer Reinbold, as well as Catherine Legg for Rahal Letman Lanigan. Who are we most excited about out of that lot?
I think I will go for Tony Kanaan. See what he can deliver in what is his swan song for IndyCar, his final IndyCar race. There's always some flair with Kanaan, so I think he's my one to watch.
Well, my answer yet again, final Indy 500 for Kanaan. He's always gone around Indy very well. And obviously, I think being the last one, being in a very strong team, I'm looking forward to see what he can do with one last rodeo for Tony Kanaan. It's had quite the IndyCar career. It's going to be very sad to see him go. One of the fun guys in the paddock is Kanaan, but I think one last swan song will be one to remember, hopefully.
I mean, what a fairy tale it would be if he could go and win it. I mean, it might be a bit of a stretch, obviously, as a one-off entry, but that would be the stuff.
Nice little send
that would be the stuff of fairy tales.
I mean, it's happened before, 2021. Hello Castroneves, one-off entry, wins a magical 4-500. These things do happen. It's why the Indianapolis 500 is just so great. It parallels to nothing else, really.
Yeah, the greatest spectacle in racing, which brings us back onto something you did mention earlier. Some slight controversy.
Yeah, so for those of you who didn't know, recent F1 race at Miami, F1 used a phrase quite a lot known as the greatest spectacle in racing. Now, that phrase is trademarked by the Indianapolis Motor Speedway in referral to the Indy 500, and IndyCar had a bit of a dig at F1, if you didn't know, if you're using that trademark. So F1 have gotten a bit of trouble, kind of raised their hands up saying, oops, we're really sorry, won't do that again. But a bit of a funny incident in the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, and I think there might have been something related to the Vegas race as well that used something of a similar essence. I don't know exactly what it was, but I did hear that something of a similar essence was used with relation to the Vegas race.
But the fact of the matter is, the Indianapolis 500 is much more of a better spectacle than a Miami car park F1 race. So I think it's a bit bold. F1 coming out with that statement. One thing we haven't touched on, we touched on quite a lot of it last week, is liveries. You wanted to mention Conor Daly.
Yes, so we spoke last week about the whole BitNile thing, and was it Bitcoin, isn't it Bitcoin? So Conor Daly, for his Indy 500 livery reveal, basically revealed his car in the BitNile metaverse, where people could sort of enter as characters in the sort of online world to go and see his car. Like at the time it was revealed, he was also streaming on Twitch. So yeah, it was one of the more interesting, but actually one of the best, most inventive livery reveals I think I've seen. So something that maybe UK listeners might not know about is the fact that in the US there's a show that I think maybe you could compare it to Drive to Survive, but I think a lot of what's been said, it's more authentic. So 100 Days to Indy, which is basically going behind the scenes in the first few IndyCar races of the season in the lead up in the 100 Days to Indy, as the show name says. But in the UK, it isn't yet available. So during Conor Daly's livery stream, he was taking questions from people in the Twitch chat, and I asked him whether it had come available in the UK. And he did say that the intention has always been for it to be available in the UK, but he's not sure why, despite I think there's been 3 episodes now, it isn't yet over here. I would imagine it's something to do with issues related to who might show it, because it's on the CW, which is, as far as I'm aware, an exclusively American channel. But hopefully sometime soon we'll be able to get that over here and could get some more people from the UK into IndyCar, because it is, as sort of we have said, one of the best racing products there is in motorsport, and I think a lot more people should be into it, and it deserves to be more popular.
Yeah, I think that's maybe the one thing IndyCar was missing, because people who get into it absolutely love it, but it is at the end of the day, I feel it's very difficult to get into, especially for a new fan. It'll take you a while to get into it. But this is kind of that Kickstarter potentially, which Drive to Survive did so brilliantly. I think this could be actually really encouraging, and it could help get these new fans in, because IndyCar's been spoken about a lot more. As I said, it's really hard to get into. We've actually touched on this outside of the podcast. But with the liveries changing each race, and you can't identify whose teammates who, and it's kind of hard to build a personal connection with a driver. You don't it's hard to get into as a new fan. And I feel maybe this 100 Days to Indy might make life a bit easier, because you can kind of get to know these characters a bit more and kind of understand the series from a basic perspective.
Yeah, there's a lot of personalities in IndyCar. That's one of the good things, and maybe sort of you look at drivers in F1 and there's some good characters, but they're obviously quite well media trained, and I'm not saying that IndyCar drivers aren't, but there's a lot more, you sort of see their personality a lot more. Like they will, and this is something we want to achieve, is get drivers on here. They'll go and hop on podcasts and have a chat with fans, or they'll openly appear on YouTube videos with, journalists after races, and there's that sort of personality, those sort of personalities that, they deserve more exposure. I mean, you've got the Bus Bros in IndyCar, Judge Fugard and Scott McLaughlin, which is fantastic. It's good. It's sort of drivers behind the scenes. It's a lot of silly stuff, but it's entertaining, and people need to be more exposed to those sort of characters in IndyCar, I feel.
Yeah, there are so many great characters. We know, Pato Ward, for example. He's brilliant on the track, but off the track he's just a really funny and enjoyable guy. And you look at characters like McLaughlin and Newgarden, and the thing I love about IndyCar is just so much more access. I can't remember what race it was last year, but it was a race we got a tour of McLaughlin's camper van or something with his parents in it. It was just, you don't get that content anywhere else. It's just why IndyCar is so great compared to other series.
Yeah, so they have a segment, I think it's called On the Streets, where basically they will literally just go to the campsite where the fans are staying, or wander through like an area where the fans are and just speak to fans. But the criminal thing is that a lot of fans actually don't know who they are, which is one reason why 100 Days to Indy could be valuable, because you got these people attending races and they go and ask them questions and they're completely oblivious to who they are, like some of the time, which I find completely insane. But imagine, I don't know, Lewis Hamilton going and wandering around the campsite at Silverstone. That's just never going to happen. Yet these guys who are still they're at the top of their series, yet they are just able to go and wander around and sort of mingle with fans, and I think that's brilliant.
Speaking of Lewis Hamilton, but he was at Donington Park for his brother, and when he was there, he was literally like hidden and everything. Like, well, he had his like shoes and his like hat and all that, but when he was there, he was trying to keep like hidden out of the way, and I was like, I found that really cool. Sorry, because I was there and I was like,
Oh wow!
No way.
Yeah, I was there, and he was so close to where we were staying as well, and I didn't realize it, and I freaked out as soon as I got home. But
I think
No
that's
way.
maybe one benefit to IndyCar not being as large scale as F1, and maybe the drivers not being quite as famous, is that, you know, they don't have to sort of hide away in public settings, because obviously Lewis Hamilton can't go and stand with the fans, like just exposed as being Lewis Hamilton, because he'd get mobbed. But I think you've got to find a nice balance between that, and I think I like the way IndyCar is right now, but I still feel like they deserve, like the series deserves a lot more fans, and the drivers deserve greater followings as well, because you've got to make the most of these characters, because it's something that adds to the series. You know, obviously the racing product is the number one thing, but the whole off track, there's just a great feel about the series.
It does feel a lot more relatable to a driver than you do in F1. F1, it feels like kind of live their own private lives, very hidden away. We don't really know what they do behind the scenes. But whilst IndyCar, the driver's very down to earth, they're very chatty. It feels like you could speak to an IndyCar driver and have like a fun conversation. I feel like a F1 driver, they're just so excluded away from everywhere else. That's a bit more difficult.
And I think they've
accessible.
got, yeah, for sure, they've got great connections to the media as well. I think you look at Marshall Pruitt, who's the sort of one of the main journalists.
Chris Medland of the IndyCar world.
Yeah, pretty much. But you don't get drivers coming and sitting in a Twitter space with Chris Medland from F1. Yet with Marshall Pruitt, you have like drivers will just hop into a Twitter space and record a podcast with him. Or after the race yesterday, he did an interview with Alex Palou where they were just sipping beers, like doing an interview after the driver's press conference. And that's just never going to happen in F1, and that's something that, as you said, does make IndyCar so relatable.
do you reckon though that that's happening because it's not as big as like F1? Like if IndyCar was to become like as big and like not an exclusive, but to come in the way that F1 is, do you reckon it'd still have them characters show through and they'd have that? I don't want to say informality of it all, but kind of have that more relatable side.
I think that. Go on, Dan.
It's an interesting one. I feel they'd be more secluded. We would see less of them, but I feel it would still be more accessible just because who the drivers are. They haven't kind of been built up through driver academies with rigorous media training and this sort of stuff. And I feel kind of the environment is just based in one country might make it a bit easier as well. I feel even if it did get bigger, it would still be very relatable to the drivers. Obviously, they'd have a bit more shut off because people would recognise them in the streets, blah 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 blah. But I still think it would still be reasonably recognised.
Yeah, I agree, and I would hope if it did ever become that big, the drivers would still be the same. And in a way, you can't really imagine them being any different because, you know, you've got, I don't know, you take Newgarden and McLaughlin again, like, they're not going to change just because there's more popularity. I mean, they're two of the most popular guys in the series already, and you don't imagine like characters would change or anything. I think you'd hope, given the culture around it, and I would hope that culture wouldn't change.
Yeah, I mean, F1 sort of lacks character. You have people like Daniel Ricciardo and Lando Norris who are very funny. We kind of got that IndyCar as well, so O'Ward's a great example of that. He seems like a really he seems like a really overexcited child at times, does Pato O'Ward. I don't quite know how to put it, but I think the best analogy is his this or that TikTok at Indianapolis last year, where he was just asking some ridiculous questions. Like my favourite was going up to Jimmy Johnson and just asking him IndyCar or NASCAR, and then the other one, my favourite one. So this was about a month before Rossi was announced to McLaren, but everyone already knew. And he went up to Rossi. He just went up and was like, "Andretti or McLaren?"
Brilliant.
And it's just so uncensored, which is so brilliant. I don't think you'd get that anywhere else.
Yeah, it's the fact that drivers, a lot of them have their own well, I say a lot of them. Some of them have their own podcast. You obviously got Off Track with Hinch and Rossi. Conor Daly has his own Speed Street, and
Grosjean's done stuff on YouTube. Bus Bros.
They aren't afraid
Armstrong.
to speak their minds either. Like they aren't afraid to speak their minds and say what could be better about the series. And one thing, especially Conor Daly's been big on it, is the marketing around IndyCar and the fact he feels that it could easily grow with a few marketing tweaks. And I think we're seeing that this season. Like there's a lot more social media content.
Yes.
You look on TikTok, there's TikToks all over the place. Some of them going, fairly big, and people are seeing them and thinking, oh, this action's cool, or these characters are good. And there's just these little segments that I think you are getting to see a bit more. And I think there seems to have been a bit of a push this year to improve the marketing side of things. I like Armstrong.
Yeah, Screaming Wheels.
Yeah.
Their new. Have you seen their new side pod thing that they do?
I've seen it, but I haven't listened to it.
So I listened to the first few, but actually I've watched the last few because they're on YouTube as well, and they sort of have videos going through the races, or certain bits, like some of iLot's onboards and talking through certain things.
The side is more technical rather than Screaming Wheels is more relaxed and fun, I guess.
What I do really like about IndyCar drivers is I feel it's very honest. If there is a problem, drivers will say there is a problem, and if there's stuff going on behind the scenes, we kind of get a bit more info. Whilst F1 is very secluded, very PR. Yes, it's all going perfectly, nothing's going wrong. Whilst I feel we kind of get that honesty, even when things aren't going right for drivers.
I feel like as well, the race coverage is. You get to hear from a lot more people and a lot of different perspectives. I feel like they'll, if there's a caution or something, they'll go and speak to strategists or that sort of thing, rather than, for example, F1, Sky in the UK having Gunter Steiner or Christian Horner just exclusively one of them on the pit wall who they dial into. Instead, they've got people speaking to those on the pit wall, throughout the race, and it gives you some more insight during the races, because one thing with IndyCar is it can get a bit chaotic during races. They can be a bit harder to follow than F1. However, I think that is just more indicative of the amount of action, and I would much rather an action-packed race where there's so much going on that you can't really keep up with absolutely everything than a race that is so dull that every little move that's happening.
Yeah, and the difference between kind of that Sky segment is I feel the team principals, they don't give a lot away because F1 the strategies are so similar. You kind of ask someone like Christian Horner and he says he doesn't really give much away, whilst in IndyCar they just happily just reveal exactly what strategy they're on and when they're going to do it, which kind of is half testament to the strategy variations we get, but also it just gives a better insight to the viewer, which I think is really, really important.
I think something we'll get a lot of stuff across the multiple practice sessions ahead of the Indy 500. I think it'll be quite interesting because there's a lot of airtime, obviously. I think it was at Texas, maybe. Hinch was up with the spotters, speaking to those of the spotters and sort of going through from their point of view what their role was or what they were looking for. And I think we'll get a lot of that insight during all these practice sessions as well. I think it would be quite an interesting thing for people to tune into. I know people turn their nose up at practice sessions, blah, blah, blah. And I think, are they fairly long practice sessions as well? But I think it would be interesting. I feel like it's, even practice sessions, you gain a lot of insight, where maybe in F1 it's more just like a glorified test session. I feel like it's just more in IndyCar.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. One thing which sparked my mind, the Lewis Hamilton conversation has just brought me back to a talking point in the last couple of weeks or so. Has anyone seen that Lewis Hamilton wants to do an IndyCar test?
That would be incredible, wouldn't it? I mean, I've seen a lot of the drivers posting on their social media, whether on Twitter or their Instagram stories, like reacting to it, like in awe. Like, I mean, that would be amazing, wouldn't it? There's no two ways about it. That would be
I wonder
incredible.
how that would go though, if he like came over, like next
I mean,
year.
it's
He's
I
driving.
don't think he'd ever come over
No.
for a race. So his request was actually really specific. So he wanted to do a test in a pre-aero screen car, which is pretty interesting.
really. I've not seen the full quotes, so that's quite interesting.
Yeah, me neither.
Yeah, I just don't think he doesn't like the aero screen. It's an F1 thing. Alonso said he wouldn't do the 500 again because he doesn't like the aero screen. I try and find the exact quote from Hamilton. But he said he'd be interested in doing a test. I'll try and find the quote a bit later on. But yeah,
I find that interesting.
I
yeah,
think a lot of the drivers are wanting to try different stuff. Like the Moto GP. I think some of the drivers are like was interested in doing a race, or not a race, but like a test of it, because they came over once in the middle of the Grand Prix, and then they were like, I know that Red Bull, they got on like a couple of the bikes. They didn't go around, but they got on it and they were like talking about it.
So Hamilton's exact quote is, "I'm not a big fan of the big screen they have, but a lot of the old school cars they have, the cars sound and look good." So yeah, just a very specific request.
I mean, there was a period where the cars didn't look great. What years was that? Was that between? They looked a bit clunky and
yes, it was around, I don't say 2015 to 2017.
right,
Where they had the engine specific. They had like engine specific aero packages, if I remember correctly, and I think it was the Chevy one, which was like really boxy, and it just looked. Ugh.
The aero screen is an interesting debate. I think more so than the Halo because it's enclosed. The drivers complain about, because obviously in the States it's a lot warmer than a lot of the races you'll get in F1 when they're using a Halo, and they do complain about it being really hot. They have to wear cool vests and they have to take on a lot of water. And I know for one that Conor Daly, Canapino as well, both had water shoved over them during their pit stops at the Indy GP because it was so warm, and it does get so warm. And that's not like a one-off either, especially if their cool suits fail, or it can be incredibly physical because of the heat.
Yeah, and obviously they've got the pipe which goes into their helmets just to pump cool air in. Look at Alonso's quote now. It says, "The last two attempts at Indy with the aero screen made me feel the car is a little bit different. And talking with some of the colleagues there, definitely the car's more difficult to drive and difficult to follow each other, so it's less fun." Interesting.
Yeah.
So F1 personnel don't like the aero screen.
Yeah, I would be interested to see some of like the top F1 drivers coming over and just seeing how they fared. I know it'd be interesting because you've obviously got Grosjean, you've got Ericsson, who, especially for Grosjean in the latter stage of his F1 career, Ericsson kind of generally, they didn't really set the world alight. But if you had someone who is properly tipped as like a, in that top tier of F1 driver come over, I would be very interested to see how it would translate. I know they mentioned on the broadcast, or at least on the Sky broadcast, that a lot of the drivers do watch IndyCar.
Yeah.
And I think Logan Sargent said he wouldn't feel like his career was complete without doing an Indy 500. So yeah, it'd be interesting.
Yeah, I know Verstappen watches it for a fact, but Hamilton has also said he watches it, and you'd be surprised if Fernando Alonso doesn't watch it, considering his participation in the series previously. So it's definitely something to look out for, and I wonder, maybe not short term, but in 5-10 years, will we see another Alonso attempt to the Indy from an active F1 driver? That would be really something interesting to see.
Yeah, for sure. I would be excited
if it was to happen.
Yeah, who would it be? That's an interesting question, actually. In 10 years' time. Wow.
Oh, in 10 years? Okay. That's...
well, if you look at like short term,
it doesn't have to be 10 years' time. Yeah, short term.
Probably be Sargent out of anyone, just because.
Yeah, I agree.
He is American. But
what do we think about Daniel Ricciardo? Obviously, didn't he say something about not wanting to do ovals?
Yes, you're right.
Yeah, I would be. Yeah.
You even mentioned Did he mention something about NASCAR? Or
Yes, he did.
I don't know what he said, but I know he said something.
Well, there's an F1 trend towards NASCAR now for Raikkonen and Button doing their fair share. We'll throw a name out there. Kevin Magnussen, one IndyCar race.
Yeah,
maybe?
That's a great shout. That's a
American
really good shout.
team. So he's actually, he's one I can see doing it. Haven't really heard anything from ever since his IndyCar debut. His IndyCar debut was actually pretty good. So he did Road America 21. He led a couple of laps actually because he was slightly off strategy. He had actually a really good performance. He retired in the end, but that would be an interesting one because obviously he raced in the States for a year when he lost his Hassie, and obviously the whole Mazepin scenario got him back into that seat. But he's a name I could definitely see back in Indy. And I might be wrong. But I feel like I've seen Sonoda say something to do with IndyCar. But yeah, there's a lot of F1 interest in it for sure.
Did Latifi ever do a test?
No,
I feel like I heard rumours, but
there were loads of Hunkos rumours for ages. Do you remember the Chip Ganassi rumours?
Yeah, I'd be interested to see that. Obviously, it's not an F1 podcast, so we're not going to go into depth on Latifi's failings, but I don't know, it'd be interesting.
It'd be too long.
I wonder how Latifi would fare, actually.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think you look at drivers, obviously you've got the F2 drivers, and I think we maybe spoke about that last week as well, but Yuri Vips, I'm pretty sure did a test.
Yes, RLL.
So he's one.
Sure.
Who else in these other series? Nick Cassidy, I think he did a test.
He's doing one, He's doing a Ganassi test.
One. Right. Yeah, I'd be incredibly interested to see Nick Cassidy come over to IndyCar.
That is actually a good one. Because
if he wins the Formula E title, you never know. He might feel that's done. That's a corner to turn and come over to IndyCar. I can see that happening. I can see him coming over and doing really
definitely,
well.
Especially with the gap which is going to be created by Alex Palou. I think Cassidy would be a good fit. I think he would be a good fit. So it'd be an interesting one. It's really good to see loads of these different drivers yet again coming into the series.
It's probably because in a lot of other series, like there's got nowhere else to go because you have to continue. But then if all the seats are full, then there's nowhere to go.
Got a bit of a sidetrack there, but that's the theme of the IndyCar podcast. Why not sidetrack if we can? We'll turn our focus back to this week, just so you know what's happening between now and our next podcast. So we are recording on the Sunday after the Indy GP. Today and Monday, they're basically just changing the circuit into its oval form. Then practice starts on Tuesday with 2 further sessions on Wednesday and Thursday. Friday's the first practice session of real significance, as that's when, it's called Fast Friday, as that's when the engines are turned up in practice for qualifying. Qualifying starts on the Saturday, as we said. That decides places 13 to 29 on the grid. And then on Sunday is the first major day of the Indy 500. So we'll decide the top 12 of the Indy 500 in a Fast 12 and Fast 6 format, effectively. And we'll also decide who gets bumped from the Indianapolis 500. Monday is the next practice session. Hopefully, Indy 500 preview and qualifying review can be out on the Monday, Tuesday time after that practice. Hopefully, this goes live either Monday or Tuesday. The previous week, and there's one more practice session known as Carb Day on Friday the 26th, and then race day on May 28th. As I said, hopefully we'll get another podcast out for you guys this week just to kind of review qualifying. Obviously we'll know who's on pole and who's been bumped, as well as looking forward to next week. So that's it for this week. Thanks for listening. If you're on Spotify, thanks for watching. If you're on YouTube, please like, share, whatever you can do just to help support the podcast. Let's get ourselves known. Let's get ourselves to newer IndyCar fans. Obviously, our goal is to appeal to the masses. So that's this week. Thank you both to Archie and Ellie for joining me for another good chat. Obviously, a lot to chat about yet again. It's that time of the month. We all know that Indy 500 is coming up. There's going to be loads of content coming out from us. It's the greatest spectacle in racing returns. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. And we'll see you hopefully back on the podcast next week. Enjoy Indy.